Asatru, A Native European Spirituality by Stephen A. McNallen. Chapter 21, The Wheel of the Year. Bloat and stumble may be performed any time the blessing of the holy powers or the ancestors are needed, but, like all cultures, the Germanic peoples held certain times of the year to be especially important. The marking of the sun's passage in the sky, the changing seasons, and the agricultural cycle. There have been many reconstructions of a workable modern Germanic religious calendar. The names of the holy days vary from one version to another. Dates may be a little difficult, and there are seeming discrepancies. But it was this way in ancient times, too. Different tribes gave highest place to different gods and goddesses, and the timing of some festivals depended on the local climate. The specifics of the Germanic ritual calendar varied over time and geography. But then as now, the major ideas remained the same. The great midwinter festival, for example, or the harvest, or the coming of spring. We celebrate for many reasons. There is a resonance between our inner nature as human beings and the changes in the world around us. In spring and summer, we are more active. Our spirits respond to the awakening of life in the field and forest, and to the warmth of the sun. Similarly, in winter we turn inward, become more introverted, and seek the shelter of the fireside against the ravages of cold weather. There is a general principle here that may be summarized. As without, so within. We are not separate from nature, we are an integral part of it. The sun and moon were seen as visible manifestations of gods and goddesses. To the simple folk, these celestial bodies were thought to be the literal gods and goddesses themselves, or at least so the Christian chroniclers would have us believe. To those with greater understanding, however, the sun and moon are only physical phenomena, behind which lies an unseen and intangible spiritual essence conceived as a spirit or deity, the noumen, as the renowned psychologist Carl Jung called it. Given this way of looking at the world, in which the sacred permeates all of nature, we can understand why our ancestors were so interested in events involving the sun and moon. As the days get shorter and the weather turns colder, the sun seems to lose its power, its ability to warm us and to give life. This weakening progresses until the winter solstice, the very lowest point of the sun's might. Then, gradually, the days grow longer again, and the sun's power grows in the heavens. Life returns to the world around us. Eventually, 6 months after the winter solstice, the sun's influence peaks at the summer solstice, midsummer, and the cycle repeats itself. Similarly, the phases of the moon exhibit a shorter cycle, moving from fullness to waning and then to the new moon, when it disappears entirely. The moon then reappears as a tiny sliver of itself and waxes again towards fullness. These astronomical movements, which we take for granted, are nevertheless of huge symbolic or archetypal significance. They demonstrate the fundamental cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth which is found throughout nature in many forms. Combine this with the idea of the sun and moon as being gods and goddesses, and we can see why our ancestors marked their passages with ritual. In regard to the sun, this religious observation centered around the winter and summer solstices, and the midway points we call the fall and spring equinoxes. Similar rites could be expected at the full and new moons, and indeed such ceremonies are common for many Asatru today. Although the markers of the year are important from a religious standpoint, they are very practical matters associated with the coming and going of the seasons. The cycle of the sun drives another important series of events, those of agriculture. Preparation of the field for planting, sowing the seed, maintaining the crops as they grow to ripeness, all accumulated with the harvest and its attendant festivals. The bounty of the crops determined whether there would be enough food to get through the winter. Producing a plentiful supply of food was a matter of life and death. Where we find matters of life and death, we find humans appealing to the holy powers. Taken together, the astronomical and agricultural cycles constitute the wheel of the year. Graphically, this is represented by a circle with the winter solstice, Yule, at the top, the summer solstice, midsummer, at the bottom, and the spring and fall equinoxes, Ostara and harvest, on the right and left midpoints, respectively. The other holy days are sprinkled around the perimeter of the circle. Significant festivals fall approximately midway between the equinoxes and the solstices, so that the whole arrangement forms an 8-spoked wheel. The year begins at Yule, or winter solstice, and proceeds clockwise through the various holy days until it arrives again at its ending starting point. In addition to the holidays based on astronomy and agriculture, there are special days in memory of Asatru martyrs and heroes. Although known of ancient origin, these days of remembrance are widely celebrated by modern Asatru. Now, let's start at the top of the circle and work our way around the wheel of the year. A trip around the wheel of the year. Yule. approximately December 20th through December 31st. To moderns, Yule is just another word for Christmas. However, before the coming of Christianity, Yule was a great midwinter celebration of the Germanic peoples. Many of the things we associate with Christmas have pagan roots. The evergreen is a symbol for enduring life. The candle and the Yule fire represent the reborn sun, and the giving of gifts and the emphasis on kin were Germanic themes long before they were Christian ones. Because of these common features, the Asatru celebration of Yule looks a lot like what our Christian friends do this time of the year. We erect Yule trees, which for us symbolize the world tree. We decorate them with pre-Christian sun symbols and runes. If we have a star on top, it stands for the North Star, or perhaps instead of an angel, we have a Valkyrie. Our homes are decked in wreaths and evergreens. Asatru get together with kin and friends and exchange gifts, just like everyone else. Yule is not just a single day, but rather a whole miniature season of its own. The common expression Yuletide suggests this tide, meaning a span of time consisting of a number of days. In modern Asatru, at least in the United States, Yule typically starts on December 20th, which is on or just before the winter solstice. We call this first day of Yuletide Mother Night, because it gives birth to the sun into the new year. Celebrations continue for the next 12 days. On the 12th night, December 31st, the season ends by swearing oaths for the new year to come. Interestingly, the modern custom of New Year's resolutions goes back to a pre-Christian tradition. In the Norse sagas, we read how the Yule boar was led around the hall, so the folk could place their hands upon it while making oaths. Several major religious ideas come together at Yule. One is the rebirth of the sun. At the winter solstice, the year's longest night, the spell of winter is broken and the days will gradually become longer. This turning point was extremely important to our ancestors, who by this time were wondering if they would have enough food to survive until milder weather. Another crucial idea at Yule is the continuity of the clan. Yule is a time of family. Not just the nuclear family, or even the extended family, but the family line itself as a time-transcending unity encompassing the ancestors, the living and the descendants yet to come. At Yule, the veil between the worlds is thin, and the ancestors are with us in a special way. Because of this, we may prepare an ancestor's plate before sitting down to the Yule feast, thus inviting those men and women who gave life to join in our festivities. Thorablut, on or near the Friday between 19th and 25th January. Thorablut is a cure for the cabin fever, induced by the long Nordic winters. It is not as well known as some of the other festivals. Maybe four-wheel drive and the internet keeps us from being as isolated during the winter as olden times. The origins of Thorablut are speculative. It may, however, be related to the first glimmers of the Germanic awakening, which was becoming evident in Scandinavia only a few centuries after the Christian conversion. By the 1700s, Icelanders were greeting the fourth month of their calendar, Thori, with Thorablotur, or sacrifices to Thori. Folklorists speculate that this is a half-forgotten memory of a winter spirit with the same name. Alternatively, Thori may have been none other than Thor himself. Perhaps his name became garbled over time, or maybe it was deliberately camouflaged to ward off Christian zealots. In any case, what better god to shake off the wintertime blues? Thor is a gregarious, cheery, and possessed of a great appetite for food and drink. No one could stay depressed for long in his presence. Asatru who celebrate Thor realize that religion should warm the heart and lift the spirit, and Thor is always up for a good time. It's a perfect occasion to get together with friends and lift a glass with the traditional Icelandic toast. Let us greet Thor with great courtesy, for he is a brave fellow. He is extraordinarily brave and powerful. Disting, Feast of Vali, Charming of the Plough, around February 14th. This festival may have different names and themes from one Asatru group to another, but there are underlying connections. The name Disting means Thing of the Goddesses. Thing, in this case, being the word for the Old Germanic tribal or regional assembly. Thus, Disting was a gathering or assembly dedicated to the female deities, especially Freya and Frigga. The ideas of fertility and rebirth dominate this event. In the old days, this might have meant saying prayers over the plow and ritually placing grain cakes into the furrow, hence the alternative names of Charming the Plough. Asatru sometimes bless their gardening tools at Disting and remind themselves that we are just as dependent on the soil for our sustenance today as we were 1,000 years ago. The connection with Vali is more problematical. Some connect it with Valentine's Day. In the mythic lore, Vali is the god who avenged Baldur's death by slaying Hod. Only by this act of revenge could Baldur be reborn after Ragnarok. Ostara, Istor, Easter, around March 20th, the spring equinox. This festival takes its name from a Germanic goddess of the springtime, rebirth, and dawn. Variations of her name are found in Old High German as Ostara and in Old English as Istore. Our modern word for Easter is a direct equivalent. I am always astounded that the most important celebration of the Christian faith bears the name of a pre-Christian deity. At Ostara, we take pleasure and comfort from renewed life. The fields are green again after winter's abuse, and newborn animals totter around on wobbly legs. We think on the quickening of life and what it means for ourselves as part of the natural order. Many Christian Easter customs are directly lifted from pagan lore. Eggs and hares have long stood for birth and rebirth. Even the common Christian sunrise services make more sense for a dawn goddess than for celebrating a resurrected Christ. I am not trying to poke fun at Christianity by pointing out these pagan origins. On the contrary, I am trying to show how much we have in common. Eggs and hares, to be sure, but more importantly, the return of life and the promise it holds for each of us. Sumersdag, Sigurblot, on or near the Thursday between April 9 and 15. In Old Icelandic, Sumersdag, or Summer's Day, was the first day of summer. For most of us, that's not particularly relevant. Few of us have lived in Iceland, and we have another festival, Midsummer, that marks the warmer half of the year. Sumersdag becomes a piece of exotica if viewed from this limited perspective. However, early April was also when sacrifice was given to Odin for victory in the raiding and trading season that began with warmer weather. This rite was known as the Sigurblot, or victory sacrifice. Many Asatru combine these two themes in a holiday welcoming the more clement weather, and at the same time invoking Odin for victory. No, not victory in sacking monasteries or raiding coastal cities. Times have changed. But what has not changed is our need for victories in the daily battles of our lives, as individuals and as a community. Victory is good. Winning is better than losing. To Asatru, victory, or Sigur, is spiritual equality, and Sigurbolt is an ideal time to strengthen this quality in ourselves. Woloberg, May Day, April 30th and May 1st. A 2nd century Germanic seeress named Woloberg won renown for traveling with German troops serving the Roman Empire in Egypt. Today, many Asatru honor Woloberg, as well as deities like Holda, Frigga, or Freya, on April 30th and May Day. Freya is especially suitable because she is a patroness of the magical arts of Seidr, a form of seership. Woloberg becomes a time for the mysteries of the earth, for the working of magic, and for inquiring into the future. The tone is one of nighttime revelry and the practice of the occult arts in hidden places, which is, of course, just how things must have been with the threat of Christian persecution hanging over the heads of all dissenters. If Woloberg is characterized by the concealing shadows, May Day is bright and sunlit. The startling polarity of darkness and light, of the underworld mysteries and the miracle of renewed life, jolts us into heightened awareness of both. May Day sings of birth, renewal, and deeds brought to fruition. It is a day to celebrate the world around us, especially the return of life to the world and to our own hearts. Midsummer, on or around the summer solstice, about June 21st. At midsummer, the hours of daylight are at their longest. From this point onward, the nights gradually lengthen as we begin the long slide into winter. Midsummer is celebrated in modern Europe, and it is a time of dancing, festivity, and continual reminders of our pre-Christian past. Some of these remnants include flaming sunwheels rolling down hillsides, and, of course, the all-night bonfires around which people congregate for merrymaking. Why the bonfires? Why the flaming sunwheel? Perhaps we wish to actively play a part in the cosmic scheme, to encourage the sun and give it strength along its decline in the descent towards eventual rebirth at Yule. At midsummer, also to remember that we are part of the drama of existence, and we seek out our connections with those we love as we gather against the growing darkness. Freyfaxi, Thingstide, around August 20th. In parts of Viking Age Scandinavia, a horse festival is common in August. Horse fights were a part of these events, with the power of the animals taken as an omen of the harvest's bounty. No specific name for this festival is recorded in the literature. When I was assembling a religious calendar for Asatru back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, I called this festival Freyfaxi, or Frey's Mane, after the horse belonging to the fertility god Frey. Any gathering connecting horses and harvests would certainly have been a suitable time to honor Frey, keeper of the holy might of virility, fertility, and plenty. August was also a common time for hosting the Thing, the rough equivalent of a legislative session combined with a law court, as well as more casual visiting, bargaining, romancing, and gossiping, with a little feuding thrown in for good measure. Hence another name for August festival, Thingstide. The Thing opens and closes with a bloat to Tyr, god of justice and law. Harvest, winter fighting, on or about the fall equinox, around September 21st. For our ancestors, the harvest was a matter of life or death. The coming of winter could be chilling in more ways than one if the storage rooms were not well stocked with food. Would the tribe thrive or starve? How many precious animals would have to be slaughtered to allow the folk to survive? The season of cold and ice was a severe test in ancient Europe. While this was a curse for individuals, it was a blessing for us as a group. The reputation of the Germanic peoples for planning, foresight, and delayed gratification stems from many generations of harsh Darwinian selection in which snow and starvation were nature's culling knife. We are just dependent on the earth's bounty as we are the Teutons of old. Supermarkets are not, after all, the ultimate source of the food we eat. Fewer of us are farmers than at any other time since the introduction of agriculture in the Neolithic age, but the soil provides for us all, regardless of how we earn our bread and meat. In a widespread economic or societal collapse, our vulnerability would become gruesomely obvious within days. During the harvest season, we give thanks to what we have produced with the help of the earth and sky. We ask for continued plenty in the future and prepare both spiritually and materially for the challenges of the coming months. Winter Nights, the Saturday between October 11th and 17th. At Winter Nights, recognize the female spirits of fertility, plenty, and well-being known as the Disir. These beings are often equated with the women of the ancestral line, looking on from the other world to bless their descendants with luck, love, and inspiration. The Disir are there to give us a helping hand when things get a little too much for us to handle. The Disir remind us that death is not a brick wall, but rather a thin veil through which the ancestors send gifts to their descendants. In return, they ask 1, to be remembered and honored, and 2, for the family to continue into the future. After all, if their line dies out, who will pour them libations? Who will tell their stories? We recall our female ancestors at Winter Nights, often invoking them ritually by name to join their living kin for an evening of feasting, laughter, and storytelling. Feast of the Einhar, November 11th. The Einhar are the heroes chosen to go to Odin's Hall, Valhalla, after death in battle. Once in Valhalla, the lore tells us that the slain warriors feast on endless pork and quaff horns of meats carried to them by beautiful Valkyries. Every day they fare out and fight each other, inflicting the most horrible wounds. When evening comes, however, they are miraculously healed so they can feast that night, and go out the next day and do it all again. This seemingly pointless activity is actually practiced for Ragnarok, the great battle at the end of the cycle of time, when Odin and the other gods will need all the heroes they can muster. To be listed among the Einhar is the highest honor the Teutonic warrior can attain. The myths surrounding the Einhar are a symbolic expression of several spiritual truths. First, the afterlife is not a place of rest, but of continued struggle, growth, and purpose. These things are, after all, the very essence of life, on either side of the transition we call death. Second, humans' actions make a difference. We can aid the cause of the gods, fighting alongside them either literally or metaphorically. Third, there is a path of transcendence, a way of becoming a demigod, by paradoxically utilizing the power of death to overcome death. The lesson here seems to be that immortality is attainable only by those not afraid to die. November 11th is, of course, Veterans Day in the United States. It is also the birthday of the famous controversial General George Patton, a true warrior mystic. Patton believed that he had been reincarnated as a warrior many times throughout history. He even experienced what today we'd call a near-death experience. Thrown from his horse and unconscious, he dreamed that he was being carried off a battlefield on a shield borne by 2 Viking warriors. They set him down when they realized it was not yet time for him to die. This chapter has introduced Asatru's seasonal holy days. Now, let's look at a different kind of observance.